Hi guys, it's Ella here and welcome to my Resin 101 series. In this series, I will share with you everything that I know about working with epoxy resin. I will share with you all the materials that you need to get started working with resin safely, how to choose a resin, any issues that you may run into for your first project or first couple of projects as a beginner, how to solve those issues, and some FAQs that you may have, things that you have asked in my previous process videos. Before we begin, for those of you who don't know who I am Ella. I am the maker, artist, small business owner here at Ellaful, and I primarily work with epoxy resin. If you check out my YouTube channel, I will have a lot of tutorial style videos already out, and then I realized that I never really went over the basics, so now we're kind of working a little backwards, but it's better to have these informational videos out late than never, so yeah, I'm doing this now. I started working with resin about 6 years ago, more or less, and I am self-taught, so I learned everything with Google, watching some videos, and just actually doing it. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, a lot of wasted materials, so hopefully if you watch this before getting started, you will be able to save yourself some time, money, materials. If you have any questions along the way, please watch the entire video first and then ask any questions you have in the comments and I will be sure to answer them. So let's get started. Before we go into my resin room, I want to emphasize the importance of working in a separate space from where you eat, sleep, and live, as well as wearing a respirator. With resin being so easily accessible, I just really want to emphasize that at the end of the day, resin is a chemical. Once you mix the two parts together, it will start to release fumes that are toxic for you to breathe in. Throughout the whole curing time, it will continue to release those toxic fumes into the air. So keeping those fumes contained in a separate space from where you eat, sleep, live, cook, do everything, because it's releasing fumes. As you do your resin pours, you would want to wear a respirator. This is a half-face respirator and it has cartridges to filter out the fumes from resin. It is rated for organic vapors. I will link all of this in the description. One more very important thing to note is that it is very possible to get an allergic reaction with resin. Everybody is different and some people may never experience an allergic reaction and some people may experience an allergic reaction on their very first pour. So just because you don't get an allergic reaction for the first however many times, it doesn't mean you don't have to protect yourself, and it's better safe than sorry. So yeah, just make sure you are protecting yourself when you are working with resin. We are outside my resin studio now, and once I put on this respirator, you will not be able to hear me, so I'm switching to voiceover mode. And like I mentioned before, this is a spare room in my house, and I am putting my respirator on before I'm entering. If you have long hair like me, make sure it's tied up first. I do not go into this room without a respirator. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but better safe than sorry. So that's my rule for this room. No respirator, no entry. So put yours on too. Once I enter the room, I change my shoes. They are closed-toes slippers because I've spilled resin on my feet before and it was not fun to clean up. My floor is covered with tarp right now because I put my resin bottles on the floor and I'm very clumsy. It's just an extra layer of precaution for myself. And now here is a mini tour of my workspace. I did not clean up beforehand, so please don't mind the mess. I have delayed this video so many times already because I keep telling myself I need to clean up first and it just never happens. I honestly just don't even know where to start with organizing all of this stuff. Maybe we will do a full tour after I figure that out. But if you have any ideas for organizing, I'm all ears because I've been doing this for far too long to be so messy. Okay, back to my resin room. I covered the back of my door with a plastic shower curtain because there is this little gap at the top of my door. Resin fumes can leak through while it's curing, so the curtain blocks off these fumes and keeps it inside this room. There was plastic on my floor for the same reason too, but that is currently being replaced. Before I touch anything in this room, I will put on gloves. Make sure your gloves are nitrile gloves and not latex or vinyl because nitrile gloves are chemical resistant. I started off with vinyl gloves and the resin was getting through the gloves and making my hands all sticky. The resin can seep into your skin and possibly cause an allergic reaction, so just make sure you always wear nitrile gloves. The only ventilation in my room is this window that I have, so I have a box fan to help me move the fumes out of this room. In the summer, the fan is pretty much always on, and then my read from a couple years ago when a bug actually flew into my piece. But yeah, now it's winter and it's too cold, so I will turn it on after the initial curing period when the piece hardens a good bit, and then I plan my pours in advance, so I pour a couple of days and have the fan running the next couple of days. Aside from the fan, I have an air purifier. The air purifier is always running. When I'm pouring, when I'm not pouring, all seasons, hot and cold, it is always running. I also got toxin removal filters for this air purifier to filter out the fumes. It is green and I got it separately. That's about it for the safety equipment, and so now we're going to move on to things that you will need to actually create your pieces. In this section, I will talk about things like pouring surfaces, mixing tools, any inclusions you may use, and just things that you may want when you're working with resin. You do not have to buy all of the materials in this section. A lot of the things are just going to be examples from my collection, and I've built my collection over the span of 6 years. The purpose of this section is to give you inspiration and ideas for what you might want to create. Starting a new craft can get very expensive when you're gathering all the materials in the beginning, and resin is definitely on the pricier end. So if there's anything that I share with you in this section that you think will be helpful for your journey right now at the moment, just get those, practice a little bit, and then you can always grow your collection of materials as you grow. So yeah, let's go. I am covering my work surface with a silicone mat. I work on smaller boards instead of my table because it's much easier to level the boards compared to the whole table. This leveling tool I'm using has 2 sections, one horizontal and one vertical. To make sure the board is leveled, I put the leveling tool on top and make sure the bubbles for both sections are in the middle. I do this in the middle and all the corners. Now of course you need resin, and you see that I have many different types of resins here for different projects that I make. In my next video, I will go over in details how to choose a resin for your project. Now let's talk about the supplies you need to mix your resin. We have mixing cups and mixing sticks, and I'm just showing you a couple of examples of each here. I have cups that have measurements on them already. It makes measuring out the resin a lot easier, especially if you are using different ratio resins. Measuring will also be in a separate video of this series because I know how overwhelming it can be to go from 1-to-1 resin to 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, and measuring resin is crucial to a successful pour. Then I have these normal cups without any measurements. I mainly use them to mix separate colors after I mix up my initial batch of resin. For the mixing sticks, I have the silicone ones and acrylic ones. Both work great. I do not use wood sticks because they are porous, and so they will create micro bubbles into the resin as we're mixing. Next up, we'll be talking about pouring surfaces, and these are things that you can pour your resin onto. This is like silicone molds, wood blanks, and a bunch of other stuff. I've pulled these clips from my previous tutorials, just showing you how I pour resin on them, literally. And if you want to check out the full tutorials, I will link them in the description, but the full tutorials will go over exactly how I work with each surface themselves. And again, you don't need to gather all of these surfaces to work with as you're starting out. They are for various different projects, so you can go check out my full tutorials, see if you like them, and then see if you want to recreate them or create your own versions of them. So yeah, let's see what we can pour resin onto. Silicone molds are very popular for resin casting. I am making some coasters in this snippet, and again, the full tutorial for these coasters are on my channel, so if you want to see how they turned out, you can check out the tutorial. Silicone molds are fairly easy to work with. You pretty much just pour resin and it will cure into the shape of the mold. In this other snippet, I am using these molds to create mirrors. Once I demold them, I will put mirrors into the slots. So there are lots of options, and the possibilities with silicone molds are endless. Next, we have these wooden bezels for jewelry. I am making a set of earrings and pendants in this clip. Many jewelry makers also use brass or gold bezels, and they always turn out really cute. If you search for open bezels or hollow frames or charms on Etsy, there will be a lot of unique options. You may even come across some custom ones. I make all of my bezels myself, so I can actually control the size and make these larger frames as well for wall decor and preserve flowers in them. Many people ask if I sell the frames, and I currently do not because they are very fragile, but I am looking into a process to offer these custom frames as well, so be on the lookout for that if you are interested. Again, the full tutorials for these are on my channel, so you can watch the entire process there. The next example for things that we can pour resin onto is this wood surface. This K was the inner cutout of my K frame from the previous clip. I am creating an ocean design on it. You can get lots of different shapes of wood cutouts at the craft store or even custom ones on Etsy. I get a lot of blanks from Michaels. These are some frames. They were actually sold as trays, but I'm using them as frames. They have a back attached to them, which is the tray part that's supposed to hold things inside. I painted the rims and I just poured resin directly into these trays. And then I will add hanging hardware to the back and they make some pretty wall art. Now for some unusual surfaces that we can pour resin on, these are just like maybe random things you find. This is a phone case. I made this one for myself and I'm decorating it with some pressed flowers. This is a plastic case and I haven't had any issues with resin sticking to the case, but if you use a silicone one, resin will not stick to silicone, and that's the reason why we use silicone molds, because resin does not stick to silicone and it can be easily demolded. Another random idea here is a compact mirror. I think these are metal. They are made for sublimation and you're supposed to put a separate piece in the space that I am resining now, but I chose to add some pressed flowers to decorate this. So yeah, there's a lot that we can make with resin, and these are only just some ideas. Get as creative as you want. Now for the inclusions and colorants, this part will focus on what you can preserve in your resin and what you can use to color your resin. There are, again, a lot of options, and I'm not showing you all the options. I'm showing you the options that I've used, and I know there are a lot of different options out there as well. I may not have experience with those, but if you have questions, I can try to help you out too, so leave it in the comments. And again, you do not have to buy all of these materials that I am showing you. I like to work with flowers, and if you don't plan on making anything with flowers, don't get them. These are just things that I work with, and I'm sharing them with you to give you ideas and inspiration for your own resin art and just getting into this resin art journey. So yeah, if you're not going to use it, save your money. If you would like to use it, then check them out. Whatever you decide to put in your resin project though, make sure they are completely dried, because anything with moisture in it, preserved in resin, will rot over time. Let's go see what we can preserve in resin. I use a lot of dried flowers and paper butterflies. Some people use stones. Coffee beans are very fun as well. We have pebbles and some shells for beachy things. And of course we can't forget our glitters because we love sparkles here. For colorants, mica powder is very popular. Colorants are what we use to add color to our resin. I love getting these sample sets and having a bunch of different colors to play around with. Mica powder does have a shimmer effect though. I don't like too much shimmer, so I have these tints. These are mixo tints, and I find that they give a very opaque, flat color. I usually mix in a tad of mica with these tints to get the color and effects that I want. If you are looking for something transparent, these are alcohol inks. Sorry, I couldn't see the camera, so they're a tad off. I actually do not use alcohol inks anymore because they are not light fast, so they'll fade over time. You can just use a tad of the mixo tints previously shown if you want to keep your resin transparent. There are probably more options for resin tints on Amazon now because it's been at least 3 years since I've searched for new colorants too. Last colorant I want to share is acrylic paint. I love these for creating pastel colors. If you are using paint though, don't overdo it because acrylic paint is water-based and too much can affect your piece curing. One last thing for basic materials is a heat gun or a torch. These are used to pop the bubbles in your piece, and now we're ready to create. So that concludes the first video of my Resin 101 series, which is how to work with resin safely and the basic materials that you need to get started. If you have any questions about it, any confusions, looking for any recommendations, any specifics, let me know in the comments and I will be sure to answer them. If you have any feedback or anything you want covered in future videos, let me know in the comments as well. And in our next video, we will be going over how to choose a resin for your first project or whichever project. Any specific project that you have in mind, I will show you how to pick the right resin for that project. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video.